What started as a push to make the Kenyan government drop a tax bill evolved into a much larger cry for social justice and a fairer future. I'm Anelise Borges, and on this episode of The Stream, we revisit Kenya through the artists that keep inspiring the movement to carry on. Last month, we looked into what was happening in Kenya. By then, protests had engulfed the country, and one of our guests, Boni, said Kenya would never be the same again, referring to how the youth was determined to change things, whatever the costs. Many of you reacted to that on social media. Judah said, "This generation inspires me. Across the globe, youth culture are holding power to account and standing to make right injustice, oppression, and corruption." He was referring to how what started in Kenya may have inspired actions in other countries in Africa.
Wake up, Nigerians! Say no to bad government!
But we are doing it for our children. We are doing it for tomorrow. We are doing it for the betterment of Nigeria.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm here to address you. You must go. Ruto must go.
We are peaceful. We are peaceful. We are peaceful.
Where do these protests stand now, and what is next for them? As we said at the start, we are focusing on revisiting Kenya today through the perspective of people who see art as a means to amplify the movement. And for that, we have joining us from Nairobi, performing artist Octopizzo, singer, songwriter Maya Amolo, artist and producer Sabi Wu, and poet and songwriter Dorfinage. Thank you all so much for being part of the stream today. I'm super excited to have this conversation. Maya, you've been among the crowds in the streets lately. You're obviously an artist, but also a Kenyan citizen, and you were protesting alongside your mother, showing that this movement actually gained the support of other generations as well. As we speak today, where do things stand? Are people in Kenya still angry?
I think absolutely people are still angry. I think when the conversation was around the finance bill, what happened was there was a lot of research that was uncovering just like a lot of corruption, a lot of like mismanagement of funds, and there's just like a new story every day that's uncovered. So like years and years of like taxpayer money being essentially stolen from us. So I do think that people are angry, but I do think at the same time people are still motivated, inspired, I hope, keeping the hope alive. Yeah, I think that's where we're at right now.
So still angry, but still fiery. Octopizzo, you guys have all used your art to protest, or at least maybe saw the struggle inspire you in your art. I wanted to ask you about the role of music and poetry and art in general in the current context in Kenya.
Personally, I think the art has always been one of the number one amplifiers of people's call for justice or call for rights from police brutality, corruption. Way before I even started rapping, most of the artists that inspired me were also talking about the same thing. But I think as the world has gone, most of the time, artists now have only been brought back to becoming entertainers. And some of us are not taking art as serious as it used to be, because also we have artists that are in leadership positions today that were talking about the same things we are saying now, but once they got in there, they changed. So art is there, is still pushing the message, but I think it goes beyond just having some songs and poetry. I think this is the soft, I'll call it soft demonstration. You know, the art is the soft demonstration, but it goes further than our environment or our geography. So I could demonstrate through music, and somebody in Lagos will relate to what I'm talking about. And I think that's where art is more broad compared to like in-person demonstration.
That's the power of it as well, right? That's it's the power of art. It crosses borders. Dorfinage, Your take on this? I mean, Octopizzo was saying sometimes it can be seen as a light way of protest, but art is a form of resistance and a form of getting a message across, isn't it?
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I think that more than just amplification, art is memory. Art is memory, art is therapy, art is hope. Because right now things might seem like they have died off, but art continues to carry this conversation forward. And in Kenya, for example, we had people like Ngugi wa Thiong'o who kept the spirit of the struggle alive. We had people like Kalamashaka, Shifter, people like Octopizzo, people who have inspired me, and that's how we've kept that spirit alive. Even as much as now is when a substantial enough number of people have come out to the streets. We've been talking about these things for a very long time, and for some of us, it's more like we feel like finally our message has fallen to the right ears, to the right generation that is willing to answer the cause. So art for me is so much bigger.
It's beautiful what you say. Art is memory, is therapy, is hope. Sabi, you actually wrote a song based on Kendrick Lamar's Not Like Us that became part of the soundtrack of this uprising. Let's have a listen.
Reject your bill, reject your bill, reject your bill. Ay, mna tax pad na simliomba kunyeshe. Situation bad si lazima turembeshe. Mabadis wakikam tia gas you arrest them. Hafla boda boda mama mboga nili happen. One tribe joma youth waliungana. Long arm of the law mshailipua. Tao kila msee anaziba tu mapua.
Sabi, can you tell us a little bit about the story behind this song?
Okay, so this song, there was the first protest, which was on a Tuesday. I think it was 20th June. And I went to town that day, and I kind of felt like the collective emotion of what people are trying to say. And then the next day, because I just like to make music and post it on my Instagram, I just did a 10-minute freestyle with the first verse, and that rejects that bill part. And I posted it on my Instagram and people loved it. So when we went for the protests again and again, I'd shoot videos with my friends, and that's how we put it together.
It's so interesting. We're going to talk a little bit more about the power of social media in these movements, but the power of social media of inspiring the soundtrack of these movements is also very interesting. Dorfanage, I wanted to get your take here, because many analysts have been talking about how much Kenya and the protests in Kenya have influenced action in other parts of Africa. You've been spending time with people in other parts of the continent. Can you share your view on the interconnectedness of these multiple struggles that we are seeing?
I think it's amazing, because social media is a double-edged sword. When we had elections, a lot of these young people who are Gen Zs, they were still on TikTok. They were still a lot of people were worried that they were watching too much dance videos and everything. But in the last few months, they've pretty much turned these social media platforms and tools into classrooms, into political education classrooms, where they're breaking down laws and policies, and that's how we've managed to have that kind of heightened awareness that has taken place in the last few months. And that kind of resonates because the struggles of the people are the same everywhere, and when the message is right, it resonates across the globe because it's the same struggle that we are going through. And I think I love it that we are able to bypass these boundaries, that way, because you don't need visas to tweet. You don't need a passport to do a Facebook post or a TikTok video. So
absolutely. Maya, I mean, in terms of this recent wave of protests, obviously they vary, right? What's happening in Uganda and what's happening in Nigeria have particularities about them. But as Dorfanage was just saying, it's a lot about what's happening to your generation, to the young people today who feel quite hopeless and, as you said, quite angry. Does it impress you to see how global this anger actually is?
Absolutely. I do think that, a while ago, back when I was very young, politics was very much a thing of like, maybe you're at a family barbecue and your uncles are discussing this and you're just hearing them complaining. But I think, with like we're all saying, TikTok and Facebook being so accessible, it does make it feel more so like our fight and our anger, and we're seeing things in real time. And I think that it is important. So I'm quite impressed. It is, I think, also another thing that can kind of get to activists and people that are in this fight is like the overwhelming feeling of like being alone and feeling helpless. So when we do come online and we see the hashtags, like you're saying, from Uganda and from Nigeria and from all over the world, it does help to kind of keep that fire burning. Like, we're not alone. We all feel similar things, and the power lies with us. And we can do it. We can.
Octopizzo, protests are not exactly tolerated in Kenya, which is perhaps many people took notice of the fact that you guys were taking to the streets. Can you talk a little bit about that, but also about the role of social media in spreading the word and keeping momentum?
I would say social media was actually the number one platform that brought everybody together on the street, because this has never been organized ever before by any politician or anybody before. And the fact that almost 10 towns could come out at the same time has never also happened before. We just used to demonstrate in Nairobi, and maybe tomorrow some people try to demonstrate in Mombasa, but these ones were happening simultaneously because everything was kind of live. Like, you just go on X and see where people are, and you go. And as you say, yes, it's not been tolerable, but I think people are just reached the verge of no limit at this point, because the most affected people as we speak are young people, are creatives. The fact that middle and upper class come out, because also protests used to be thought of just of like people from lower backgrounds. But this time we saw lawyers on the street. We saw most upper class people on the street complaining about good governance and corruption, because now even them, they're being affected. And it was the first time I've seen people demonstrating non-violently too. And this also, the government or the police didn't know how to deal with this, because this was new for them. Absolutely. They're used to people go to demonstration is fights, but this one, people are just singing, dancing with placards, expressing themselves. So I feel social media was number one, and it's still number one thing that we are using now as we speak. It is tribeless. It is like, you can't tell who you're talking to sometimes, even online, but you share the same values and ideas, and that's enough. Absolutely. I met so many people on the streets that I don't even know, but it was always a vibe. It was always like, when you're out there, it's like you're going for a party. I think if you've ever been to a demonstration, there's a different adrenaline you get there that you don't even want to go home. And I think that was beautiful to see and also to experience at the same time, while you're fighting for something very powerful, which is change.
On that point, Bija Mataria commented on our previous show, saying this is a leaderless, partyless, tribalist, fearless movement, and the Constitution is actually guiding everyone. This is the new strategy to deal with what he calls reckless people who call themselves leaders. Power to the youth. We have the energy. We can use it to liberate ourselves from mental slavery from the modern colony. Sabi, can you share your take with us here? Do you think that this is the movement that is happening in Kenya right now?
I think I agree with that. And in the past in Kenya, politics has been really on tribal lines instead of like focusing on what will actually better the people. And I think what can actually better people is removing that boundary of I'm from this tribe, or from having one specific leader who you all have to trust. I think now it's for like, the government should listen to the people, and it should cater to the people's needs, rather than following like the path of let's do it as a tribe, or me, I'm from this tribe, I'm from here, and this is my place, and my person should get elected so that we develop my place. I think it should be more, if we want to step in the right direction, I think those are the values that will get us there.
Again, it's reunited generations and people from all walks of lives, and people that wanted a different Kenya. We also came across a very interesting point, and I want Dorfanich to actually react on this. On TikTok, we saw this particular point on the impact of international financial institutions in Africa, and particularly in the current context of Kenya. Take a look.
Of every pillar of the society by the current government seems a bit too intentional.
This is because the IFIs, international finance institutions that they borrowed from, impose these conditions on our governments. Some of the conditions include reducing fuel and maize subsidies, freezing public sector wages for 3 years, and most importantly and notably in healthcare, like we have seen with the recent healthcare protests. The general idea is that they'll be able to pay the loans back faster. The government is quite happy to do this because they are in no way going to cut their own salaries. So, the rest of you can go to hell. And yes, high taxes are part of this process. The thing is, we don't have healthcare. Food is expensive. You're taxing us more. And this is what somebody is going to be left with. It doesn't make any sense. Then knowing how corrupt our leaders are, is this money even going to make it back to said IFIs? Assuming said IFIs had good intentions.
Dorfanich, Maya had mentioned how people were educating themselves as well, right? During the protests, more stories were coming to light about corruption, etc. Would you say that this has also happened, the fact that people maybe are opening their eyes with regards to the dependence to international finance institutions?
Absolutely. I think, even part of becoming tribeless that now, because tribe has been such a smokescreen in terms of, blocking people's clarity on who the enemy really is. Because we know, I've been involved in this struggle for pretty much the last decade. And the thing about it is, the local government is just a proxy for the multinationals and the imperial powers. Like the president here is a big impediment to the people's struggle. We have to ask ourselves, whose interest is he serving? Because essentially, we realize a lot of these policies are not even locally driven. A lot of the policies that they are pushing, they're driven from somewhere else, where, we can speak about the IMF, the World Bank, and so many other, international institutions. So I think that for me, I love the fact that we're finding that clarity of getting to understand who the enemy is, because we might win the local battle, but then unless we also push it forward to form solidarity with other, that are being affected in the same way and push back, because these people are giving us loans in bad faith, right?
And it's very interesting how it's opening eyes, again, across the world. Even students in the US are quite angry about certain loans that are given to them in bad faith. I'm curious about one thing, and I want to ask Octopizzo this. Has, protesting and coming forward with your opinions, with your views for Kenya, has it impacted your career at all? Have you felt any kind of backlash from, certain contracts, etc.? Were people a bit upset about you speaking up?
Unfortunately not. Or fortunately not. The clients I work with, I think, as a brand, this is who I've been for the past, 15 years that I've been doing music. So, it becomes tricky if only you're introducing yourself to this kind of stuff. But we've been doing this. I've been demonstrating since I was 10 years old. So different type of demonstrations until now. This is the upper echelon of demonstrations now. So, and we're still just getting better at it. So I'm fortunate that most of my clients understood that this has nothing to do with me as an artist to begin with. This has to do with me as a Kenyan citizen, and I think most of the time, even us as artists, we get either overwhelmed or think like, oh, we are only artists. Before we were artists, we are human beings. We are Kenyans, Our artist names are not in our IDs. I'm fighting for the name that is on my ID, fighting for my kids.
That's a very, that's
why.
I would say that's a very privileged position to be in, because certain artists can't really afford to do the same thing. Maya, I would like your personal view on what's next. Again, politicians have backtracked, they have dropped the tax. What is going to happen to this movement? And do you have hopes for a better Kenya to materialize for your generation?
I absolutely do have hope. I do have hope, and I try to keep the hope alive. I think what's next is just to not give up, not get too comfortable, keep holding the leaders accountable. I was seeing on Twitter today that they may be trying to reintroduce the bill somehow, but like under a different name. So we cannot let up. We have to keep holding them accountable, let them know that we will not forget, like, this is our life, this is our country, we're going to keep fighting for it. I do want to keep the hope alive. It was very difficult, and it still is very difficult because people have died. Like, we cannot stop now. People have been killed, people have been murdered, and we cannot stop now. So what's next is keep holding the politicians accountable, let them know that we have our eye on them, we're not foolish, we know what's going on, we're smart, and yeah, keep using the tools and keep the fight going.
Sabi, can I get your take here? I mean, we've been talking about the art and the music and, again, the hope among the people. But as Maya just said, people have lost their lives. How do you keep the momentum going when there's so much at stake?
I think, first of all, it's really unfortunate that people had to lose their lives. And I don't think there can be anything that can be said or done to brush that over, because people demanding for a better country for themselves shouldn't result in them being killed. That's number one. Number two, about how I see the movement going. I think now people are very much more aware and educated of what's going on in the country and how it's being mismanaged and how we can actually come together to make a change. So I think that educating people, even me myself, I've come to learn new things that I didn't know before, all because of this movement. And I think like that was just the first step in the door, because people still want change. People still want to have a better future, better country for themselves and for future generations.
Dorfanage and Octopizzo, I want final words from you as well. We're almost out of time, so please be brief. Dorfanage, what do you think is going to happen? What do the next few weeks and months hold for Kenya?
As somebody who's been actively involved in the struggle for the last 10 years, I can tell you this. This Gen Z movement was an injection of life. It was like a rejuvenation of hope in this country, because it had gotten to a point where people were so hopeless and so apathetic, so disillusional about the state of affairs. But it took that happening for people to realize that something can actually be done, right? And I think for me, all I can see is this spreading out and people becoming more aware, because now with more awareness, it means we can start holding all these leaders accountable. So it's not just the president that needs to be held accountable. It's all the entirety of the political class elite. So we have to keep on pushing that. And I think now the biggest job is for us to make sure everybody's on the same page and continue educating people, continue disseminating the information that people need to understand exactly what's going on. Because there's a lot. We've won this war, or this battle, but the war is far from won. That kind of impunity has to stop.
Octopizzo, final word from you. What needs to happen for a new Kenya to emerge?
Well, as we say, there's hope. We are hopeful, but hope is a good breakfast and a very bad supper. So we are hoping 50-50. The people are still the same. They are trying to reintroduce this thing in a new way. So for me, what I'm seeing next is like, there'll be new ways of demonstrations. I think also the normal one on the street, they infiltrated somehow and got some of used to be against each other. But I think this was the most important thing, that it sparked this conversation that was never had by young people. This conversation was almost or all the time being run by the elite and the political class and the older generation. So I think moving forward, as a movement, there'll be more re-strategizing. There'll be more civic education on how people should get their voter registration, because we could go to the street, yes, for years, but if we want to follow our constitutional rights, which we use our votes, is that we have to change this through the ballots. We want to see more young people coming out to leadership roles too. We don't want to always just be fanatics, so I'm expecting to see more young people in the coming months or the coming years coming into leadership roles and making the changes that they are talking about. And I'm excited about this period of time. And there'll be more demonstrations, probably even before the next 2 months. We'll be in the streets for sure. if things keep going the same way.
All right, and we will be following that story very closely, of course. Octopizzo, Maya, Sabi, and Dorfanage, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being part of the stream. And thank you all for watching. Don't forget you are part of this show, and if you want to help shape the next episode, all you have to do is use the hashtag or the handle AJStream to send us your questions and suggestions. Take care, and I'll see you soon.